Sins of greed and wrath, circles 4 and 5 of hell, Canto 7 of the Inferno. This is Dante, canto per canto. I'm William Dunbar.
And I'm William's father, Patrick Dunbar.
I'm finishing up my senior year of high school at the Scuola Italiana Cristoforo Colombo in Buenos Aires, Argentina.
I'm presently outside Phoenix, Arizona, having been separated from William for 7 months now due to COVID. So we're very thankful to be participating in this Canto discussion. We've been Dante fans for quite a while, from William's memorizing terces as a toddler to visiting Dante sites in Florence and Ravenna.
And what a great canto we have today. I mean, besides 2 circles and 2 sets of sinners, we have Plutus, Dame Fortune, the River Styx, and clergy bashing.
Yeah, Canto 7 of the Inferno brings us down to the 4th circle of hell. Dante and his poet guide Virgil have navigated the circles of limbo, lust, and gluttony. The souls that they encounter in this canto will end those circles devoted to the sins of incontinence, represented in the poem's introductory canto by the she-wolf.
Or the leopard, depending on the scholar of your choice. The canto opens up with the babbling of the pagan god Plutus, who's not to be confused with Pluto Hades, but rather the god of wealth. He's standing like a sentry to the entrance of the circle. And he's a curious figure for our times. I mean, we have plutocrats in the White House as well as in Wall Street and in Silicon Valley just trying to dictate our worldview.
Yeah, it's funny that Dante cast Plutus as some sort of blithering nonentity in hell. He's so exalted here on earth, where shopping malls have replaced cathedrals. The prosperity gospel would have him enthroned in heaven right now. I guess this is a way for a theological Dante to dethrone a false god. We'd like to take a stab at the meaning of that phrase that Pluto blathers, pape satan alepe.
Well, plenty of scholars have given it a shot, but there isn't really a consensus. We just know that it's in some sort of evocation of Satan.
So Virgil makes short work of Plutus with a rebuke. I really like the John Chiardi translation here. He says, "Peace, you wolf of hell, choke back your bile and let its venom blister your own throat." I mean, that's a good retort for the Twitter outrage mob.
Yeah, Chiardi really jazzed up Dante's original, which is "Taci maledetto lupo, consuma dentro con te la tua rabbia." Once Plutus deflates, we encounter a class of sinners that is very timely right now. And it's always going to be. We have the greedy in 2 varieties, the hoarders and the wasters. They are condemned to eternally reproach each other while pushing an enormous weight back and forth. They yell to each other, "Perché tieni e perché burli?"
Yeah, this is a timely topic because greed is frequently encountered in all stages of history. But today we find ourselves in a time of wealth concentration, really since the 1970s, has snowballed to a point where Pope Francis calls ours an economy that kills.
Well, Sparky Sweets of Stug Notes calls the hoarders greedy shysters who don't do nothing but chase paper.
Well, the subject of wealth concentration can seem complicated, but St. Augustine in his Confessions explains it very fundamentally from the point of view of an infant. The human milk provided by the baby's mother and nurses is not created by them, but by God through them for the purpose of nourishing the baby. Things are distributed, Augustine says, ad fundum, by God's loving plan. Now, can you imagine the absurdity of a mother's hoarding her milk from her baby? That's why hoarders are being punished.
Yeah, the doctors of the church had a lot to say about this subject. Augustine's mentor, St. Ambrose of Milan, was very harsh on the greedy, telling rich almsgivers that they were merely returning to the poor what they had stolen from them. And Dante would have been familiar with the doctrine of St. Thomas Aquinas about the universal destination of goods.
Yeah. We hear that our industrial capitalist system is the cause of greed, yet Dante's denouncing hoarding 450 years before Adam Smith published The Wealth of Nations.
I don't know. You might be going off track with this. I don't think Dante is commenting on the effects of hoarding on society, but rather just the individual people who do it. But either way, that behavior is a violation of God's plan.
Yeah, one of the strangest hoarding stories I've ever heard is about a corrupt governor in an Argentine province, and he ruled for 60 years. He started stealing the day he got in office, and he never spent a single penny.
That reminds me of that saying by G.K. Chesterton. To be smart enough to get all that money, you must be dull enough to want it.
Yeah, Chesterton also said that if our Savior's words mean anything, it is that a rich person is morally untrustworthy.
Well, let's shift over to the wasters, Pat.
Well, yeah, the wasters are another form of the same sin. It's treating God's gifts in a way that are contrary to his ordinance.
Yeah, I love this image of squanderers being stripped even of their hair, questi coi crin mozzi, on Judgment Day. And then the contrapasso of these two types of sinners is clever, being yoked to each other for eternity. For although they consider themselves that they're opposites, they're just two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. The art depictions of this canto usually show people in pairs pushing large boulders back and forth. Now, Dante makes special mention of priests, cardinals, and popes who were guilty of money sins. Things must have been really corrupt back there in the 14th century. It's a good thing that they're all cleaned up now, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, the year 1300 sounds a lot like 2020. We just had the sixth cardinal in history resign a couple weeks ago for what looks for it to be like a financial scandal. And there might be a woman involved who just got arrested. I mean, you gotta ask, don't these guys read the Inferno?
Looks like they don't. I mean, there's never been a shortage of intrigue in the Vatican, and some of these episodes are almost cartoonish in their greed. Now, Dante seems to single out popes for hoarding. Pope Francis certainly is aware of this reputation and has, sought to counteract it with his own acts of financial humility. Now, we live in Argentina, and from what we know about this pope's life, greed is not one of his temptations.
No, it isn't. And on the wasting side, Pope Francis is very critical on what he calls throwaway culture. He says in his new encyclical, Fratelli Tutti, we have grown indifferent to all kinds of wastefulness, starting with the waste of food, which is deplorable to the extreme. What is thrown away are not only food and dispensable objects, but often human beings themselves.
Yes, that's a cornerstone of this Pope's social teaching. But Dante is harsh on papal abuses, and he's not done with this subject. We're going to see further treatment of financially corrupt clerics in later cantos in hell. Now, observing the hoarders and squanderers touches off an elaborate discussion between Dante and Virgil about fortune. What's that all about, William? And how does a pagan goddess fit into Dante's Christian scheme?
Well, Virgil observes that the greedy are so obsessed with hoarding or squandering wealth that they're just left with nothing when fortune spins her crazy wheel. Fortuna was a Roman pagan goddess, a personification of fickle luck. But St. Augustine did not have any use for her. She said, if everything is random, what is the point of being good? But Boethius gave her Christian attributes, and Virgil describes her as an angel of God to shake things up and restore equality. She remained a popular figure in the Middle Ages. Even Machiavelli was still writing about her a couple centuries later.
Yeah. By the way, this is one of the few cantos where Dante does not mention a specific representative sinner by name. They are so obsessed with their greed that they are disfigured beyond recognition. Now, Virgil and Dante move on after the greedy down to the fifth circle of hell. They descend a level to the muddy swamp of the river Styx.
Yeah, as Dante puts it, in la paluda va con nome Stige, questo tristo ruscel quando è disceso al piede della maligne piagge grigie.
Okay, here we find the sinners of wrath who cannot contain their anger. Now, William, I didn't really think of anger as being a sin.
Oh yeah, I mean, listen to this reading from the book of Sirach. Wrath and anger are hateful things, yet a sinner hugs them tight. Could anyone nourish anger against another and expect healing from the Lord? If one is who but flesh cherishes wrath, who will forgive his sins? So yeah, I'd say wrath is a sin.
Okay.
I would have expected Achilles to be sentenced to this circle here, given that the first line of the Iliad is just dedicated to the wrath of the son of Peleus. He's the first person to think of when it comes to wrath. I mean, you have thousands of lines in the Iliad that are just dedicated to his anger. But Dante consigned him to the second circle because of his lustful desire for Polyxena.
Yeah. So it's just a rather brief description while they're here in the circle. The two poets, walk through without comment, just merely observing the wrathful spirits ravaging each other. I read the Inferno for the first time 40 and was really chilled by this scene. It was terrifying. I even remember exactly where I was sitting when I was reading it. Now, William, we've seen a lot of anger on the streets of America since the late May death of George Floyd in police custody, many protests have been destructive. Now, do you think this could be considered wrath?
I don't think so. I mean, the circles up to this point, excluding limbo, are reserved for personal sins of incontinence, not for acts of political violence. In fact, Dante even criticized early in the poem those people who can't even cross into hell for not being able to take a stand in political controversies. These are the ones that T.S. Eliot refers to in his poem, The Hollow Men.
Well, just as there were two varieties of the greedy, the angry sinners come in a pair. You got the wrathful flailing and tearing each other on the surface of the fetid marsh. And then you have the unseen sullen souls beneath them who are murmuring, and their complaints rise up to the surface as bubbles. It's like when you're walking on the beach and you see a wave recede and you see those bubbles coming up from the sand crabs. You know, I've asked myself, are those sullen souls down there?
I think that's too clean of an image. I mean, I think more of like nauseous methane farts bubbling up from just disgusting mud.
That's more graphic. Now, I happen to be rereading William Faulkner's Light in August, and it's easy to imagine the protagonist Joe Christmas under that mud, because he's often described as sullen. But he'd be at home at many of the circles in hell, especially some that are coming up.
Yeah, I think it's just fascinating that Dante considers that being a grump is a sin. But it fits with his criticism of not using God's gift as God intended. We are granted time in this cosmos so that God is created and declared very good. And if we devote time to bitching, moaning, complaining, just being gloomy, we allow a sinful, disappointed self-centeredness just to cloud our vision.
Yeah, I agree with you there. So Canto 7 ends, but our travelers still have to cross the river Styx in the upcoming Canto 8 toward those circles devoted toward the violent. So what have you gotten out of this?
Well, personally, I just hope that reflecting on this canto will make me less prone to hoarding or wasting or even being wrathful or sullen. I certainly don't want to spend eternity being torn apart, stranded in mud, nor engaged in like futility.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah. So yeah, this powerful poem really instructs you as it sweeps you along. I got a question for you that doesn't apply to this specific canto, but do you think that people believe in hell the same way they did in 1300 or even 100 years ago? I just saw the movie Fatima, and on the July 13, 1917 apparition, the Virgin Mary gives the three shepherd children a vision of hell. And I read that the 7-year-old Jacinta Marto was very deeply affected by this vision, and she prayed fervently that no souls would be sent there. Up to the point when she was extremely ill and dying of the Spanish flu.
Yeah, she was canonized 3 years ago, making her like the youngest saint who was not a martyr. But no, I wouldn't say. I would not agree. I don't think that people just don't believe in hell as much as they used, just as much as people aren't as religious as they used to be. We already saw a change in the 1900s when people stopped going to church and started going to movie theaters much more. And maybe that's just a general shift in society where we're just being less religious and we're just not considering religious aspects like hell and etc.
Well, no, I remember reading a depiction of hell in James Joyce's A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, and that was terrifying. I mean, I agree with you that it does not seem to be on the forefront of people's minds today.
But it was in Dante's time. One final point before wrapping up. I think it's important when discussing the Inferno to always remember that it is the first third of a comedy that also includes purgatory and paradise. I mean, if it were only about hell, it would be more like an Ibsen play than an epic poem by the Dante Alighieri.
That's a good point.
We have now traversed 5 out of the 9 circles of the Inferno. Lust, gluttony, greed, and wrath. It has been rough, but we all know the sins will become even more vile and even more complex as we descend. Things are going to get much worse and much harder. If you enjoyed hearing about these lost souls, head over to the next episode of Canto 8, where you will meet Black Gelf Filippo Argenti. And remember what Dante inscribed on the gates of hell: Giustizia mosse il mio alto fattore, fecimi la divina potestate, la somma sapienza e il primo amore. May Dante's comedy continue to provide us the wisdom to discern justice. Arrivederci.
Arrivederci.